Hello everyone, my name is Sperry DeLuca and the topic of my project is Asperger Syndrome. As you can see on top, I've abbreviated it as AS just to keep things short during the PowerPoint, but more often than not I'm going to be referring to it as Asperger Syndrome instead of just AS. So let's talk about the background of it briefly. Asperger Syndrome is a neurological condition that lies on the autism spectrum disorder. It is considered to be on the high functioning end of the spectrum. People who have Asperger's syndrome are born with it and have it for life, although as they mature, they may gain new skills, outgrow some of their Asperger's syndrome traits, or use their strengths to compensate for their areas of disability. It is also a fact that the majority of the people with Asperger's syndrome are males. Let's talk about the genetics of it. Research has constantly indicated that there is a genetic foundation for Asperger's syndrome. When a person is diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, it's not a surprise that the family realizes many relatives have Asperger's syndrome traits to some degree. It's just that they never sought out help, or they were never diagnosed because who knows, the family members might have just thought they were different or weird or whatever other adjective they might have used to describe them. What many don't know is that the role of genetics in autism appears to extend beyond the neurological system. There are also genetic abnormalities. Genetic abnormalities affecting the immune system have been documented in the families of children with autism. Studies show that 46% of families with autistic children have two or more members with other autoimmune diseases. The most common autoimmune illnesses reported are type 1 diabetes, adult onset rheumatoid arthritis, hypothyroidism, and lupus. Let's talk about the commonality of Asperger syndrome. Only recently has Asperger syndrome been publicly recognized on a broad scale. Because of this, it's hard to determine how common it is. Researchers estimate as many as 1 in every 250 people have Asperger syndrome, and that as many as 50% of people with Asperger syndrome remain undiagnosed. Some people with Asperger syndrome continue to be misdiagnosed, while others fly under the radar. This means that their traits are mild enough so that they manage to adapt and function sufficiently enough to be considered unconventional or strange. Let's talk about the symptoms. Um, children with Affected children and adults have difficulty with social interactions and exhibit a restricted range of interests and repetitive behaviors. Motor development may be delayed, which might lead to clumsiness or uncoordinated motor movements. Compared with those affected by other forms of autism, those with Asperger's do not have significant delays or difficulties in language or other cognitive development. It is also a fact that uh, students or children or people with Asperger's syndrome lack higher level thinking and comprehensive skills. Just to continue on the symptoms, there are many associated behaviors with Asperger's syndrome as mentioned, but they are seldom all present in any one individual and vary widely in degree. A person with Asperger's syndrome may exhibit limited or inappropriate social interactions. This may be due to challenges with nonverbal communication, like gestures or facial expressions. A person with Asperger's syndrome might also exhibit robotic or repetitive speech along with lack of eye contact that may cause them to be socially awkward. A person with Asperger's syndrome often engages in one-sided conversations and has trouble keeping conversations due to tendencies to discuss themselves rather than others. So they basically are just focusing on themselves, and you really can't call them selfish because they don't know any better. They're not really too, they don't care about you or anything like that. So let's talk about the diagnosis. One of the hardest things about Asperger's syndrome is the difficulty of its diagnosis. The reason for this is because it often remains undiagnosed until a child or adult begins to have serious difficulties in school, the workplace, or their personal lives. For example, many adults with Asperger's syndrome receive their diagnosis when seeking help for related issues such as anxiety or depression. The children that don't get diagnosed early are due to the parent being neglectful and accepting the fact that maybe their child isn't going to be like everyone else, and them not being socially successful is just a product of their school environment. So basically, they're blaming the school and saying that it's not their child's fault. Something's going wrong, going on in the school. They're doing something wrong, and maybe I need to get my child out of there, but it's not my child's fault. My child is fine. So no, that's not the right way to go about this. They should seek out help just to be safe than sorry. So this is also where the teacher comes in. The teacher should be trained to pick these sorts of things up in order to make the parent and child study team aware so that immediate help can be sought out for. It's also important for parents to track development during the child's progress as a toddler to see if there's anything that is not on par with the average healthy baby. Although it's hard to know when a child will learn a given skill because children develop at their own pace, being aware at all times will not hurt in any way. So here are some milestones that parents should keep in mind. Many babies at 7 months will be able to turn their head when their name is called, smile back at another person, respond to sound with sounds, and enjoy social play like peekaboo. At age 1, children are able to use simple gestures such as waving, respond when they are told no, make sounds such as ma and da, and imitate actions in play like clapping. At 18 months, children do simple pretend play. They start to point at interesting objects and have the ability to look at objects that you're pointing to. At 2 years old, children are able to say 2 to 4 word phrases, follow simple instructions, and demonstrate interest in other children. At age 3, they can show affection for playmates, use 4 to 5 word sentences, and imitate adults as well as role play with their dolls or other action figures. Tracking and making sure your child develops at the proper pace definitely gives you the best chances at an early detection or intervention for conditions such as Asperger syndrome. We're aware that many children are visual learners, and this is especially the case for children with Asperger syndrome. The teacher must attempt to make everything visual. Visual cues and lessons can be very helpful to the children. Some examples are visual graphic organizers using the computer or smartboard, or even something as simple as boxes on worksheets that can indicate both where to write and roughly how long an answer is expected to be are effective. Uh, the use of colors and strong visual symbols to indicate different areas of the classroom and activities are also beneficial. To continue on ways of teaching students with Asperger syndrome, in a class containing a student with this type of syndrome, the teacher has to be wary of their speech. They should monitor their voice, pause between sentences to allow for processing time. They should not give out too much information. They should not give out ambiguous information. And teachers should definitely avoid metaphorical questions and avoid sarcasm. Sometimes it might be necessary to repeat instructions to be sure that the child with Asperger syndrome gets it. Enhancing their social skills. For children with Asperger syndrome, the teacher has some sort of responsibility to provide social skills training for the student. A buddy system or other forms of groups are highly encouraged. For group activities, always use teacher selected groups because this ensures that the child will not be left out. Because of their difficulties with social interaction, children with Asperger syndrome may not be picked by their classmates to join teams or groups. This is why teacher selected groups allow for the teacher to separate the child with Asperger syndrome from trouble spots and to ensure that he or she is working with students who are likely more tolerant or accepting of his or her difference. Just like teacher selected groups that I just mentioned, it can be helpful to use teacher selected seating. It may be easier for the student with Asperger syndrome if you provide them a seating chart because deciding where to sit can cause anxiety for the child with Asperger syndrome. And seats that are taken or saved, as some of the meaner students might say, hey, this seat is saved for my friend, that can lead to, feelings of social rejection. And we don't want that for our student with Asperger syndrome. So how can parents help? When it comes to Asperger syndrome, parents must be involved in the child's schooling, after school, and especially over the summer. A good strategy, as research shows, is activity schedules. An activity schedule is a set of pictures or words that cues someone to engage in a sequence of activities. An activity schedule can take many forms, but initially it is a binder with pictures or words on each page that cue children to perform tasks, engage in activities, or enjoy rewards. Now, depending on the child, the activity schedule can be very detailed, breaking a task into all of its separate parts, or it can be very general, using one picture or symbol to cue a child to perform an entire task or activity. The goal of activity schedules is to teach independence, choice, and social interactions. Photographic and written activity schedules provide a framework for helping children with Asperger syndrome learn to make choices. If we provide careful and systematic instruction, students with Asperger syndrome not only learn to follow schedules, but they also learn to sequence their own activities and to choose leisure activities that follow structured teaching sessions, homework, or home living tasks. So, although we mentioned a lot of struggles and symptoms that are focused on the negative parts of Asperger's syndrome, there is some bright spots, and it's very important to note that all the challenges presented by Asperger's syndrome are often accompanied by some unique gifts, due to, such as children with Asperger's syndrome have good memory, and because they have good memory, some even demonstrate impressive vocabulary. But this shouldn't really represent or for the most part, it doesn't represent true understanding since most of the times they're merely echoing what they have heard or read. So they probably will be unable to use it in a sentence, or something like that. Children with Asperger and high functioning autism are clearly able to learn and excel. And if certain teaching methods are used, their progress can be nothing short of fantastic. It's obviously the parents and the teacher's responsibility to try to make the students uh, use these certain tools. So let's talk about tools. Students with Asperger syndrome can greatly benefit from assistive technology. A good source that can help you find tools such as apps for students with autism is appyautism.com. Appyautism.com is a web catalog that helps find the most suitable apps for every person with autism. The site also has links to external sites that have devices and products that help with speech, communication, and other things. In conclusion, when dealing with a child with Asperger syndrome, the ultimate goal is to help and guide them through their years of development so that they can grow to be smart and independent individuals. The most important factor in all this is undoubtedly parenting. The first and what most researchers call the most important steps are early detection and intervention. This can only be accomplished by the parents since they are the ones that see their child daily as they are growing as an infant and baby. Only through early detection could the best results be reached for Asperger syndrome by getting the necessary treatments, therapies, and other interventions. All children deserve to be evaluated to determine if they need help or not. Children can be diagnosed as early as 18 months now, so parents should not hesitate to act since they have nothing to lose.